As soon as the monitor comes up. Very good. Welcome to the Lincoln City Council meeting of the 16th of April, 2018. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance, followed by a period of silent meditation. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And we will now have the Mayor's Award of Excellence.
We need to find the mayor.
Oh. This is like, where's Waldo? Come right on up here with me, sir. Okay, and since I'm the acting mayor, now Jane is acting as the council chair. All right. The Mayor's Award of Excellence for March is presented to a team from Watershed Management Division of Public Works and Utilities. Shannon Ideas is a senior environmental health specialist and has worked for the city since 1986. Timothy Pratt is an engineering services manager and has worked for the city since 1999. They were nominated in the categories of loss prevention and productivity by senior environmental health specialist Rock Kritzky for their work to streamline the application process for notice of intent permits. Both the city and the state require a notice of intent permit for construction earthwork that disturbs 1 acre or more. The city receives on average of 65 to 75 applicants a year. Several times a year, an applicant files a notice of intent with the state, but not the city. Beginning earthwork without a city permit violates Lincoln Municipal Code. In these cases, the city spends an average of 8 hours per site to follow up with the owner or their design firm. In addition to site inspection, this involves possible orders to stop work, which must be approved by Public Works and Utilities Director, and possible involvement from the City Attorney's Office. To prevent this from happening, Shannon redid the web page for the city's notice of intent application, as well as the instructions for applicants. During the process, Shannon coordinated with the state and with state permission went through the application process several times herself. She created a step-by-step instruction for the city's website and a flow chart for the for the approvals. Shannon asked Tim if an online, preferably dual application process could be developed. The applicant would only have to apply once to receive both city and state permits. This would eliminate the problem of earthwork beginning without a city permit. Tim told Shannon the state and city used the same software program and felt that this could be done. Tim initiated meetings with Shannon, the state, and the software firm DataBank. Shannon created flowcharts to show the current application process the city used, as well as the city and state permit elements for the current and proposed processes. The state agreed to allow the city to integrate its permit application into their existing system, and DataBank coordinated with both entities on the electronic submittal forms. In November 2017, the state implemented the new electronic online submittal program that allows the applicant to file for both the state and city permit simultaneously. The new permit process also eliminated the paper forms the city had to store. The new system saves the city about 100 hours of staff time every year. The new streamlined dual permit application began with a great idea and came to fruition through many hours of hard work by Shannon and Timothy. It is my pleasure to present this team with the Mayor's Award of Excellence for March. Please join me in congratulating Shannon and Tim for their hard work and their commitment to the City of Lincoln.
We need to get a photograph here.
Oh, a photograph, yes. Let's all turn this way. My one and only picture as acting mayor. Okay, don't go anywhere. Okay, we'll first hear from Ben Higgins from Watershed Management, and then from Donna Garden from Public Works. And then we'd ask Shannon and Timothy to say a few words as we recognize them.
Thank you. Thank you, council members. This is really a pretty amazing deal when you think about it. I mean, you got a city and state permit that are coming together, and at one time, the consultants and the developers, they'd have to bring forward a permit. They'd have to get the state permit first. They'd have to bring that to us, and then they'd get the city permit. And so I worked here in the early 90s, and we actually tried to work with the state a while to not have them have a permit, but I mean, they have to have their own process too. And the problem was you can get the state permit, but they just looked at the paperwork. They didn't really look at the details to it, and we look at the details to it. So we really needed to have it done both ways. And so we really need somebody like Shannon, and it's pretty amazing because she understands IT, and then she understands what we do. And then she was kind of thrown in the deep end when she started here, because the very second week she was here, we had an EPA audit. And so you got the EPA audit, and all they're doing is throwing out acronym after acronym. And so it's pretty confusing, but she got it. And so a year later, she's thinking, why are we doing it this way? This is just confusing for everybody. It makes it harder for the developers, consultants. It makes it more paperwork for us. And so she did all this work, and it was a lot of work to do that, to really get this into fruition. And Tim, he really understood what was going on. He had a really good relation with the state and the state data bank, and it just all worked out really well. So I really appreciate it. I think it was a really great job, and couldn't have done it without either one of these two. So thank you.
This award from the mayor recognizes that to those that provide outstanding service and commitment to the city. And it's very well deserved with Shannon and Tim. This is an example of government becoming more efficient. And it's pretty impressive that it not only helps the fellow employees, but also helps our contracting community and the builders out there as well. And I know there's more in the works, because I've already heard about some new things that are coming down the pike, so that's great. So this is an example of how government should work together. And I want to personally thank Shannon and Tim for their resourcefulness and ingenuity. Thank you.
Shannon, would you like to say something?
I'd like to say thank you to Ben for allowing me to go off the beaten path and try new things. I'd also like to thank Tim for listening to me and putting up with me for many years. And a thank you to Rock for sharing his wealth of knowledge in watershed management. Without him, this couldn't have happened. So, thank you.
Thank you.
I'd like to acknowledge that my wife Becky is here today. Put her on the spot, but it's nice of her to be able to come down. I appreciate that. As Donna said, a lot of things that we're looking at integrating, more to come. I really appreciate the efforts on the state in this. They were a big partner, a big player in this, so appreciate it very much. Thank you.
Thank you all very much. In accordance with LB 898, a copy of the Open Meetings Act is posted at the back of the chamber. The order of business of the City Council is as follows. The clerk will call the items listed on the agenda under public hearing. Anyone wishing to speak on an item should come forward after the clerk has read that item. The applicant and those in favor should speak first, then those opposed. The applicant may then make one short rebuttal. Each speaker should begin by stating name, address, and whether you are speaking in favor or in opposition to the item. Testimony is limited to 5 minutes per speaker. After public hearings, the council will vote on resolutions and then on items listed under third reading. On the second and last meetings of the month, immediately prior to adjournment, anyone may speak on any issue not on the agenda for that date, nor planned for a future agenda. Will the clerk please call the first item?
Yes, our first item is our public hearing consent agenda, items 1 through 3.
Would anyone like to speak on any of these items? Next item.
All right, if not, we can vote on the one item. It's item 1C. This was introduced by Eskridge.
So moved.
Second?
Moved by Carl, seconded by Jane. Discussion? Please call the roll.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Lamb?
Yes.
Raybold?
Yes.
Schob?
Yes.
Camp?
Yes.
Christensen?
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0. Next then are liquor resolutions. Those giving testimony are asked to come forward, raise their right hand for the clerk to administer the oath. After the oath, witnesses shall state their names and addresses. I'll call items 4A and 4B together. They're the application of Sidecar Cider for a Class C and L liquor license at 1746 N Street and the related manager application of Eric Layden. Would you raise your right hands? Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give is the truth as you verily believe it to be?
I do.
Thank you. Just state your name and addresses.
My name is Tracy Sanford. My address, 2829 South 24th Street, Lincoln, Nebraska.
Eric Layden. My address is 2234 Woods Crest Avenue, Lincoln, Nebraska.
Thank you.
Okay, tell us about your application, please.
Sidecar Cider is applying for a Class C wine, beer, spirits on sale license and a Class L craft brewery license. We are a manufacturer of hard cider. We will have 3 flagship products for distribution. Our facility is at 1746 N Street. Approximately 2/3 of the facility will be used for crafting hard cider, and about another third of it will be used as a tasting room so consumers can try our products. We'll offer also not only our flagship products, but other flavors of cider that we will handcraft on site. Additionally, because hard cider is often used as an ingredient in cocktails, we are applying for the Class C retail license so consumers can understand the full range of hard cider. Our tasting room will initially have limited hours. We're thinking Thursday, Friday, 3 to 10, Saturday, noon to 10, and Sunday, noon to 4. And because we want our place to be community friendly, we also will be offering food and non-alcoholic options to accompany our fabulous cider selections. Customers will be able to consume on-site or purchase kegs or growlers for off-site consumption.
Okay, are there any questions? Thank you very much for being here. Would anyone else like to testify on this item? Next item, please.
Next is item 4C, manager application of Dina Waltz for Nebraska Club for a Class C liquor license at 233 South 13th Street.
Hi.
Raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give is the truth as you barely believe it to be?
Yes, I do.
Thank you. Just state your name and address.
Deanna Walls, 1026 Lancaster Lane, Lincoln, Nebraska.
All right, tell us about your application, please.
I'm the new manager at the Nebraska Club, and we are a private dining facility, and we are applying, I'm being listed as the manager on our liquor license.
Okay, questions? Thank you very much. Would anyone else like to testify on this item?
You can sit.
Mr. Chair, I move approval of items 4A, B, and C.
Second.
Moved by John, seconded by Lyrian. Discussion? Please call the roll.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Lamb?
Yes.
Raybold?
Yes.
Schob?
Yes.
Camp?
Yes.
Christensen?
Yes.
Motion carried, 7-0. And just a reminder to the public, when you're giving testimony, please sign in on the sign-in sheets on the podium.
After you speak.
Yes, that's okay. Item 5A is accepting a report of new and pending claims against the city, as well as claims which have been disposed of for March 16th through the 31st, 2018.
And there's a sign-in sheet on the other side as well. Would anyone like to speak on this item? And anyone here to appeal a claim with the city? Very well. Next item, please.
All right, next then is item 5B, authorizing the mayor to execute contracts with energy service companies to design and install energy-saving equipment and systems that have payback periods of not more than 15 years on buildings or operations that have a useful life of 20 years or more.
Good afternoon, council members. Frank Ularic, Sustainability and Compliance Administrator for the city. Thank you once again for entertaining this proposal for the Energy Savings Performance Contracting Policy. We've been talking about it for some time, adjusted in the LEAP document as one of our corresponding goals and strategies. 6 weeks ago, had a lively hearing to go over some of the details, and again, I'd like to remind us all of the scope and intent of this resolution 18R-42 with the amendment, a couple of amendments, is that we're trying to provide clarity and direction to the staff and our energy savings performance contracting firms that are working with us on how to structure both the audits and the financial agreements that are set up for these projects. There is no impact on the council authorities that you currently have that we're pressing forward with this resolution. And again, it's looking for a target of a 15-year payback on 20-year assets or greater. It mirrors the national and regional trends and targets for energy savings performance contracting initiatives, and it conforms to state law well within the guidelines provided by the Nebraska Energy Office. Benefits, again, aligns with LEAP and positions Lincoln as a leader in energy efficiency, energy savings, and renewable energy that we can also package in these projects if a decent payback. Reduces our operational costs, improves facility comfort and functionality, takes advantage of economies of scale by packaging projects and using vendors that have volume buying power. We have a local economic positive impact by using local contractors and suppliers to the extent that it works within the project boundaries. Relieves staff burden from trying to implement these types of projects citywide, which again, we don't have the resources or the expertise to do so on a day-to-day basis. And it levels out the CIP and O&M budgets for many of our departments once put into the program and laid out for years to come. Financing options we've gone over and Brandon has explained. Our initial preference is to look at internal borrowing as the best rate we can receive on these initiatives. Municipal lease is an option if available, CIP, bonding, and probably the last option we would consider is ESCO financing, but it's an option that's always available to us. Again, the contracting terms we've considered for purposes of the resolution to be multi-year projects, subject to council approval. Funding resolutions, if required for new projects, must come before you. And newly identified projects, i.e. the streetlights project, require Planning Commission approval, which last week the Commission found in conformance 7-0 with the comp plan, and as well, Commission approved the text amendment to the design standards allowing outside contractors to do what was previously exclusively LES activities. We've completed the preliminary audits on all the facilities across the city for the most part. Shelved a number of them, trying to focus on the priority projects that make sense to move forward with now, with the streetlights, libraries, and we'd hope to move forward with an IGA on Parks and Rec soon. We've deferred decisions on the police, fire, and some of the public works and utilities facilities until they can be examined better for payback and conformity with their needs as well. I'd be glad to answer any further questions, details on the resolution. I know there was some comments received Friday I've responded to since, and would be glad to entertain any other questions you've got.
Cindy, then Jane.
Thank you. Thanks for being here again today. So you had mentioned preferring internal funding, but I just want to clarify the funding mechanism is not part of this particular policy agreement or policy that's coming before us,
No, we are
right?
not in any way specifying what mechanism we will use. That'll be based on the project.
And you're familiar with my motion to amend number 2 that's going to come forward that would give the council oversight, would require that we see every ESCO agreement before it's executed?
Absolutely.
Okay, and you don't have any problem with that?
Nope.
Okay, thanks very much. Just want to make sure.
Jane?
And, I want to reference Cindy's amendment. It requires the mayor to negotiate, but it also requires the city council to approve. Are you comfortable, should we reject an agreement that is negotiated that has a lot of services bundled? Would you, how would you process that if we would say we want a lot of the items decoupled as you negotiate rather than bundling several projects in one fell?
I would say we're hopeful and confident that the projects we bring forth are something that are going to be approvable by the council in whole. And if for some reason we need to dissect that and modify it accordingly, we'll work with you to do so.
And I guess how will you handle that when you go out for the bids and proposals on these different projects? I guess I would feel more comfortable if each one should have a standalone item and for them to estimate the cost and the payback period for each one of those items. If they choose to try to bundle it, I would like to be able to, as a member of the city council, to decouple some of the things.
Absolutely, and you've seen from the preliminary audit examples, and it's even further laid out in the investment grade audits, is that each ECM, or energy control measure, energy conservation measure, can be laid out for its individual payback period, and so it's all transparent and visible. We'd prefer not to just go for the strictly the low-hanging fruit, because in some case, some of the other elements are tied into that low-hanging fruit and could, like a control system, could potentially make your lighting more efficient rather than just going for the lighting. So we want to bring forth a package that makes sense, but again, there'll certainly be an option for us to, look through and select whatever the council is most comfortable with.
So, but are you comfortable and is legal comfortable when you go out for the requests for proposals to specifically say that so that those who bid understand that they could be decoupled? Should it come before us?
I think what we've seen, and I suppose we can get some clarification from ESCO firms on this, is that when they seek bids, there's this understanding to a degree that, contractor A may be only bidding on this element or that element. And I think that's, I don't know for certain, but we can clarify that option exists for them to decouple their bids. But and very often when you've got multiple vendors proposing on a project to the ESCO, they have that in mind, that they could only get one piece of the project, so they are bidding that accordingly.
I just want to make sure that there's no misunderstanding or misrepresentations on our part that,
Right.
they do it as a package, each component as a package, but.
Chris Connolly, City Law Department. Yeah, in terms of the proposals, I mean, we'll put out a proposal for a particular building, for example, and we will look to see how they come back. And they will then make recommendations to us through the initial, the preliminary audit as to the kinds of things that they think should be done. Now, they're not going to have a dollar amount attached to them at that point, but that'll give us some idea of what they think needs to be done. And we have enough internal resources that I think that staff can make those kinds of judgments as to what seems to make sense going forward. And then the next step is the IGA, where now we're starting to put dollars to each of those parts of the project. And at that point, we can make determinations as to what we think makes sense to bring to council for approval. And we can certainly provide you information as we're going through that process as to what we're seeing. But we're not looking to bundle things just for the sake of bundling. We will bring them if we think that a particular package makes sense. There may be times when particular items in a proposal will get pulled out because we think that's a lower priority. And even if there may be some savings, it's a low enough priority that we don't think it works for this particular package. I'm just throwing out an example. So there will be some back and forth on all of these as we go through them.
And besides the cost, you're insisting on the return on investment?
Yes,
The years.
the 15 years, that's the real guidance that we're looking for
That's
here.
like the high end, if they come forward with a project that has a return, a payback of 18 months, I don't think we would say no to something like that.
No, right, and I would agree on something like that. But what's important for us as a result of this, in this resolution, is to give us the guidance and to set a policy really for the city to say, this is where we're at. And everything under less than that is going to be acceptable. And if it's more than that, then it won't be acceptable. And that's not only helpful to staff, but as Frank said, it's also helpful to the contractors that we'll be working with.
Okay, I just want to make sure it's clear.
John?
Yes. I understand the administration is somewhat backing off and that they could live without a legislative policy. Would you comment on that?
We're backing off regarding,
Well, that was contact I had from the administration over the weekend, that if we didn't pass this, that they're not going to lose any sleep over it. What they're focused on is seeing like the street lights that we would approve and go forward with individual contracts, but as far as giving the open-ended, discretion on your part to bundle all these up, and then we just get it at the end of the last railroad station.
Well, I think what you're referring to is that if we don't have this resolution adopted, would we still be looking for a 15-year payback? And the answer is yes. I mean, in what we've been looking at in terms of the returns and the payback periods for the projects that we've been looking at, and thinking about 20 and 30-year projects, which we can do, we've come to the conclusion as staff that the 15-year payback seems to be the most reasonable way to go in terms of policy. Individual projects may be less than that, which is great, but we think that from a policy standpoint, that seems to make the most sense. So that's sort of where we would be heading under any circumstances.
Well, my concern is, and I appreciate the amendment that's coming forward to have them consider multi-year projects and that they would come before council before the execution, but it's up front in deciding what gets in there. I want to see the council involved, not just on an informal basis, but that we are formally involved to look at these, because once you start that train down the tracks, you do incur things, like in the present situation of streetlights. If we don't approve it, we have to pay back to cover the investment grade audit that the vendors did. And I'm not saying we're going to do that in that case. And therefore, if we're not allowed before and at the end of the train trip, I can't give a discretion to go ahead like this, because you're committing a lot of resources to the city. And again, in so many other measures, once that snowball leaves the Matterhorn and gets down to the village, and you're saying we're down in the village and this avalanche is coming, are you going to approve it or not? We've done all this work. It just puts us in this body in a very precarious situation, and I don't think that's appropriate.
In terms of a formal step, I'm not sure what you had in mind, but I mean, certainly, anyone that wants to make a request to us, we will certainly provide the information at any
I want
stage.
a formal, though. I don't want to just say you'll provide the information.
Yeah,
We don't have staff
I'm
to
not in
do
a-
that.
I'm
We
not in a
need
position.
you to be mandated, if you're going to do these, that each project you would bring to us and tell us what you want to include. Doesn't mean it doesn't get modified somewhere in between, but that, and then the final proposal you bring to us. But I want to see us, the body, the city council, involved up front.
Are you saying you want to scope the IGAs?
If I understand you correctly, yes, I want to upfront, you may, I think there's going to be the potential of including a lot of different items that maybe due to a number of concerns on the priorities of the city and so forth, our budgetary constraints, that we go a little bit more austere, or maybe we include some other things because of what is being proposed. I don't want to see us as a mindless body. I want to see us involved in that. And therefore, it puts an additional charge on your part. Whereas right now, you've gone out and done all these things with a number of different projects, and essentially, we were kept in the dark. And I don't even want to go forward, and you're just saying, well, if you have questions, call us. I want it to be very proactive. And so I would rather at this point not approve this policy and go ahead and vote individually on the ESCOs you have out there, such as the streetlights, which have a lot of value to them. But to just go forward and do this where even with the amendment, we get involved at the last minute, I can't support that.
So what you're specifically asking for is to review the investment grade audit scope prior to engaging in the investment grade audits?
Yes.
I don't
Pardon me?
I don't see why that would be a problem.
Formally, so we'd have
I don't know that either of us are in a position to, I mean, maybe you feel like you can, but I don't know if we're in a position to speak for the administration in terms of setting up a formal process. Certainly, the informal process of advising you when a scope is coming up is certainly, there's no problem with that. I agree with that. But in terms of a formal procedure to bring a scope to the council, I don't know if we're in a position to.
Well, what if we
agree
put
with that.
this on pending with a definite date, and so you can visit with the other members of the administration that I've talked to? And that wouldn't necessarily stop you from coming ahead with the street lights as an example. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying the policy is not, even with the amendments, doesn't have the checks and balances that I think are appropriate for the citizens of Lincoln.
But we're quite comfortable with the basis and the approach and the streetlight project that'll be approved. What we're trying to move forward is investment grade audits, particularly in Parks and Rec, so we can get ready for the next biennium budget cycle. There's a significant need and opportunity, and we're really wanting council approval to move forward on that IGA, which this policy is the first step in doing.
I think you can talk to us specifically without this.
Okay. We're not going to negotiate this from the dais. Would anyone else like to speak? Thank you very much. Would anyone else like to testify on this item? Please come forward.
Good day, Tim Green, 7835 Fort Street, Omaha, Nebraska. I do have 6 close family members that are citizens here in Lincoln. I had a chance to send an email late Friday after some discussion with Mr. Steffen from LES. And my biggest concern on the street lighting plans involves a lack of warranty coverage for the product. Specifically, though it may take 15 years to pay for the new equipment and installation, there's only 12 months of warranty for parts and labor. The labor part is the big part of the installation. It's the big part of any repair on an LED fixture because in most cases, anything that fails, in most cases, is going to be a modest item, a $10 dusted-on sensor, a $30 or $40 power supply, and yet it may take $80 worth of bucket truck time to go out there and make that repair. I made a suggestion in my email that Ms. Lamb's resolution, the addendum number 2, could have a simple modifier. You're already wanting to keep a good focus, a good sharp focus on any financial plan. Let me make the humble suggestion that the warranty provided should at least match, if not exceed a bit, the payback period. If I was going to sell you a new car and I said, you want to buy this because it's a maintenance-free auto, and the payment plan's 15 years, but there's only a 1-year warranty, I would hope you would hesitate and begin to ask questions, well, what if it does break down? What will it cost? We heard on March 5th some testimony that these are maintenance-free fixtures. By golly, they can go 25 to 35 years maintenance-free. Well, no municipalities had that experience at all. There are a few that have had fixtures in place for about 10 years. They've not had that experience at all. There will be failures. And if we're typical at all, we'll see probably 3% failures in the first 3 years. So there will be failures. My discussion on Friday with LES was even more alarming when I discovered that the new rate schedule, the $2.85 per fixture per month for LED fixtures, includes nothing for repair of those fixtures, not 1 cent. LES tells me that will go strictly towards wire maintenance, pole maintenance, and they're having more wire work to do with the fiber optic cable being installed right now. But there's nothing in there, so that will change over time. If we launch out on a 15-year payback period, have just 12 months of labor warranty, you can expect to see that monthly charge from LES change dramatically over time. I dare say, I doubt there'll ever be a payback on that proposal. The 15 years assumes no repairs at all for 15 years, and that won't happen. Every time there's a repair, which means an LES rate adjustment for the city, that's going to bump that payback period further down the road. At some point, those fixtures will need to be replaced. And as I mentioned in my email on Friday, some cities already realize there's about a 10-year replacement schedule on a lot of those fixtures. So I'd urge a lot of caution, but if nothing else, demand a real warranty from whoever supplies the product for parts and labor.
Thank you. Are there questions?
Mr. Green, what is before us is the policy, not the actual ESCO for the streetlights. What's before us is the policies that has been proposed here for future development of ESCOs. It's not the actual streetlight ESCO.
Right, for the policy.
So
for
you use that as an example, I think. Right,
street lighting is a good example. I think you'll find that the topic of can we bid things and have them itemized, would a contractor like myself, I have a lighting company, would we be comfortable bidding line by line, knowing only 1 or 2 of the lines may be accepted? Yes. Would we be comfortable creating a bid at no upfront cost? Yes. I think that's very typical. The street lighting is a little different because of the size of the project and such, but yes, I think the warranty is very important. Have that warranty at least as long as the payback period, if not at least a year longer, as I mentioned in my email. That way you know you've got a sound financial plan, and if part of the project is to save money, you know that will occur.
I'd like to just point out that in any case, in any event, this discussion has nothing to do with this policy that we're putting out. That's a detail that would come forward for a specific proposal, so thank you for your concerns.
Right.
But-
Again, based on the addendum, I'd like to see that added to that addendum, because it was sound, but it could go right on there for all projects, not just the street lighting.
Okay, thank you. Would anyone else like to testify on this item? And opportunity for a rebuttal.
Frank Ularek, Mayor's Office. I'd like to just briefly address some of the data. Mr. Green has thrown around a 3% figure, but from the same presentation material he referenced, conveniently overlooked that the vast majority of Boston's failure rate was less than 1%. And the idea that we're going to be unfunded for LES maintenance, I think, is unfounded. In fact, the 285 rate that he referenced is already projected to be $336 per month per luminaire. We've accounted for that plus escalation for the next 5 years to handle, just such maintenance occurrences should they occur. The vast majority of those luminaires will fail in within the year, the first year period, as far as the defects. So we're quite comfortable, and that we have the best industry warranty available. I guess I'd ask Mr. Green from his own manufacturing or business process, would he offer a 15-year warranty for type of equipment for this project? And certainly, the cost that would add to this would be prohibitive, and we wouldn't be coming back for a streetlight project by any means. So,
okay, Jane.
Mr. Green's point is a valid one when it comes to warranty on labor and material. And so, some companies offer a warranty on the ballast, say up to 2 to 5 years. So what type of warranties are you going to build into the bid proposal that goes out, so people know exactly what is expected of them?
LES is very strict in requiring that there's a 1-year complete labor and parts and a 10-year material replacement. So yes, the idea that on day 366, a luminaire on 27th Street fails, then technically we'll have to deploy an LES truck at that whatever rate that would be. But again, I can assure you, we're well funded for LES's maintenance fees in the foreseeable future.
But doesn't the warranty question depend on what kind of a project we're talking about? Because we're not always going to be talking about streetlights.
Right.
Right. That's
The other
what's offered.
projects.
That's what's offered for the street lighting products.
So
for
it kind
sure.
of depends on what kind of project we're looking at, right?
Right. HVAC could be 5 years. Personally, I really don't know. We'll have to see what is prepared and proposed on a project-specific basis.
Okay, John?
I know we're not speaking about the streetlight ESCO, but we keep talking about 15 years, and my understanding is the streetlight would only be a 9.4-year agreement.
9.4 in payback.
9.4 years, that one would not be 15. It
We're
would be
still
only-
we're still negotiating on the price, and it's hovering around a 10-year payback.
Anything else? Thank you very much. We've reached the end of our public hearing resolutions, and we'll now go into a voting session on resolutions.
Yes, first is item 5A, the report of claims against the city. This was introduced by Camp,
So moved.
Second.
Moved by John, seconded by Carl.
and we do have a motion to amend number 1.
I will move motion amendment number 1, which would delete the denial of a claim for Todd Schmeckel.
Second.
Moved by John, seconded by Carl. Discussion? On the amendment, please call the roll.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Lamb?
Yes.
Raybold?
Yes.
Schob?
Yes.
Camp?
Yes.
Christensen?
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0.
Now discussion on the main motion. Please call the roll.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Lamb?
Yes.
Raybold?
Yes.
Schob?
Yes.
Camp?
Yes.
Christensen?
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0. Next is item 5B. regarding the ESCOs, introduced by
Go back in history.
Gaylor Baird.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Illyria and seconded by Benny. Discussion.
And we
Cindy.
do have a motion to amend number 2 on this one.
Thank you. I've withdrawn motion to amend number 1. So I would propose, make a motion to amend number 2 with the changes as are indicated there, which would make every ESCO contract a multi-year contract, and that would require review for the council for approval and then signed by the mayor to become effective.
I'll second that.
Moved by Cindy, seconded by Jane. Discussion on the amendment number 2. John?
Yes. Ms. Lamb, would you consider some language that would also require approval by the city to proceed beyond the initial stage for an ESCO?
I'm sorry, I don't understand the motion. It would,
Essentially, your motion to amend number 2 requires it comes back to the city council because it's deemed a multi-year contract. As you heard in my questioning of Mr. Ulrich, I have a concern at the very beginning, before this train starts down the tracks, that the council has affirmative input on the totality or what's going to be proposed or reviewed for a possible ESCO.
So let me clarify something. We no longer are in the habit of doing friendly amendments. So if you want to amend her amendment, just move it.
I don't have language. I'm going to move for a deferral anyway, or put this main item on pending, so we'll just do it that way.
Okay? Discussion on the amendment. Cindy? No, Cindy, excuse me. Jane wanted to talk. You already talked, Cindy.
Well, you know, I am going to support this amendment because I want to make it clear that we want to work with great projects that bring any energy efficiencies to our operations. I support that 100%. But I also want to challenge and make clear that I would reject any bid or proposal that comes back to us for our approval if it doesn't give us the authority to do a line item restriction, because I know what we've heard from other providers and suppliers that would like to be bidders on these projects is they like to bundle, because that's how they probably can achieve the greatest energy efficiencies and savings on paper to show us. And we may not want to go forward with each and every item that they call forward in their bid. We need to reserve the right to reject some of those elements, with the understanding that we are going to move forward on these elements maybe at a later date when we discuss it, based on the energy savings we hope to capitalize on. So I'd like to be able to pay for future energy saving or future projects that provide energy savings from the savings that I'm achieving as I go along through the process of improvements, rather than just throwing it all out there. So I want to make sure that we have that right when we get to that point in the discussion, when they come before us, to reject them.
Okay, other discussion? Lyrian?
I'm going to support the motion to amend that Cindy brought forward, because I think just having another chance to discuss any proposal and have public comment makes sense, and it's part of what we exist to provide. So I think anything that we feel good enough to support should be able to stand the light of day.
Okay. On the amendment, number 2, please call the roll.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Lamb?
yes,
Raybold?
Yes.
Schob?
Yes.
Camp?
Yes.
Christensen?
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0.
Further discussion on the main motion?
Mr. Chair, I'd move we put this on pending for 3 weeks.
The motion to put it on pending for 3 weeks. Is there a second?
Do you want continued public hearing?
Yes.
I'll second it for purpose of discussion.
Yes, Mr. Chair, the reason I'm asking for this is, in fact, Ms. Raybold's comments she just made really are not encapsulated in the policy. I do respect the suggestions she had. I think those are very valid. And so I just think there needs to be some massaging, but I can't support a policy that does not have upfront city council approval to proceed. Again, it's just the perpetual snowball in the Matterhorn that keeps going down, gaining mass, and it comes to us last minute, and that's not respectful of this body and our taxpayers.
So let me ask you a question, John, to be clear. What do you expect to happen between now and 3 weeks?
I would expect two things. One, from my standpoint, I'd like to see language that requires the pre-approval by the city council to proceed. And secondly, with what Ms. Raybold has said, I think she has brought up some good parameters that need to be incorporated into a policy. And with those items, that would satisfy my needs.
Okay, so it's been moved and seconded. Further discussion?
I like the idea, John, but I feel that we've given our team, our departments, enough direction on how to go forward and proceed, knowing full well that if they bring forward bids and proposals that need our approval, that they very well could be rejected if they aren't in compliance with the directions that we've provided them. And I think we have been very clear on that. If we haven't, maybe Frank, you want to come back up? Do you have clear direction? And Chris, I mean, otherwise, then we'll have to support John's proposal for a further delay if it's not clear on the direction that I've spoken about.
Frank Ularek, Mayor's Office, we're absolutely comfortable with what you've suggested and, want this to be an open, collaborative process and developing the projects that are best for the city. You bet.
Yeah, we fully understand that it makes no sense for us to bring an expensive, complicated project unless we're pretty sure that it's going to meet everyone's approval. And that goes not only for the beginning, but it also goes really for the, not just at the end of the process, but the beginning of the process too. In terms of setting up a formal procedure, though, I think that's where there may be some additional difficulties in us trying to establish how something like that would work. But we want these things to happen, and we know we need your approval.
Carl?
Yeah, thanks, Roy. Just so I understand the way a process might work, would these proposals come, say, through Parks and Rec, the Parks and Rec Board, through that process, or would they come reports from the mayor's office, or how would we get this information?
Well, the preliminary audits have already been completed. We've offered copies to you all, and those provide high-level cost estimates, potential returns on investment. The next stage is the investment grade audit we've entered into already for the streetlights and the libraries. After the audits are completed, the projects are developed, the contracts negotiated, and then brought forth to the council for execution of the project.
And that could be from any department, though.
Okay.
It could be from Parks, it could be Public Works, it could be from
What
any
John
levels.
is suggesting, though, is it would come to the council before the investment grade audit was initiated. Is that correct, John?
Yes.
Okay. John?
And I appreciate these two gentlemen saying that they understand that and so forth, but what happens when they're replaced and they're not here, or what happens when we on the council are, if we're gonna talk about a process, I think we should be able to put it in writing so that future people understand they need to take these steps, and I don't see that for caution there. And, we can continue with the other ESCOs you're talking about now and vote on those individually, but if we're gonna put a policy there, I wanna make sure it outlives you gentlemen.
And you
Awesome.
too, John.
There you go. I'm getting age discrimination here.
Well, I kind of felt some
Thank you.
too, John. I'm hoping I'll be around a while.
Okay.
Thank you. I don't have any questions for you, gentlemen, if everyone's through with that. I just wanted to address the motion. The reason that I put forward amendment number 2 was because I did have a couple of concerns. One of them, when we first heard about this, and one of them was that these were going to be actually executed without oversight of the council if they were considered single-year contracts, and law indicated that that's what they would be, single-year contracts. And so while I appreciate what you would like to see it up sooner, come before us sooner, I think that's possible potentially with another resolution that we could ask for that to happen. But as far as this policy is concerned, I am more concerned with not having a policy in place than having a policy that makes these multi-year contracts right now before we get any of the ESCOs going through and funded without this council being able to see and ask questions like warranty and payback and metrics and that kind of thing. So I'm, at this point in time, while I support the thought behind why you would like to see a delay for the language, I think we could do that probably in the same period of time with another resolution. But I would rather not see this delayed. I'd rather see a policy in place that allows us to see all these contracts.
Further discussion on the motion to delay. Please call the roll on the motion to delay.
Eskridge?
No.
Gaylor Baird?
No.
Lamb?
No.
Raybold?
No.
Schob?
No.
Camp?
Yes.
Christensen?
No.
Motion lost, 1-6.
Okay, so we are now discussing the motion to amend.
No, the motion to amend passed.
Let's pass, excuse me.
We're on the main motion.
So now we're on the
now.
main motion. Very good. Discussion on the main motion? Please call the roll.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Lamb?
Yes.
Raybold?
Yes.
Schob?
Yes.
Camp?
No.
Christensen?
Yes.
Motion carried, 6-1.
Okay, now we'll go on with public hearing ordinances, second reading.
Item 6A is adopting the supplements to the Lincoln Municipal Code dated June 2017 and December 2017 as part of the official Lincoln Municipal Code.
Jeff Kirkpatrick, City Attorney. The ordinance before you is a cleanup ordinance that we bring before the council every year, simply authorizing the law department to go ahead and do cleanup on the ordinances you've passed throughout the past year and publish them.
Okay, questions?
Thank you.
Would anyone else like to testify on this item? Next item, please.
Next is item,
Please come forward.
Wilderness Road, like I said, that wasn't much of an explanation. Cleanup ordinance, you know, it doesn't tell people out there watching or here in the audience really tell us anything, other than that it's going to clean something up. And, well, I guess I would like to see more information when they do this.
Okay.
Thank you.
Anyone else like to testify on this item? Next item, please.
Sorry, could we have Jeff come back up and just elaborate? Because we do use a lot of lingo and jargon, and I think you could probably answer that question pretty easily.
Sure. What that means is if we notice there's a comma that was left out, we add the comma as we republish it. And the codification process is we pass the ordinances and we put them in the code in a way so they're easier to find. So they're presented to you individually as you pass them, but then we add them to the city code.
For publication.
For publication.
Okay.
In this case, primarily our publication, most people access it online.
Got to be careful with commas. It can make a big difference.
See.
Eats, shoots, and leaves and all that.
We take commas very seriously in
Okay.
my department.
Good.
Okay. Next item, please.
all right, next is item 6B, amending ordinance 20261, approved October 26, 2015, as amended by ordinance 20407 on December 19, 2016, authorizing tax allocation bonds for the Victory Park VA Campus redevelopment project by limiting the area from which property taxes may be diverted to the specific project area with which that bond series is associated.
Welcome, sir. So is this our third visit to the rodeo?
Third visit on,
This issue?
it might be, and in the event the federal government puts a clinic on this location, it might be the fourth and the fifth, who knows? We have had several iterations, absolutely. Members of the council, David Landis, applicant in this case, flying blind and without bond counsel present. But I can tell the story, and the developer is represented here as well. This was the entire Veterans Administration project area, and we contemplated that we'd done in phases. A very significant difference was between the VASH housing and the rest of the project that really was critically linked to the use of the clinic. What you've got before you is, since it's now time to do the bond, the clarification that for the bond's purposes, it is just the area of the VASH housing that will be used to pay the bond, and it doesn't impact any of the rest of the area, which is appropriate because when those become significant, we'll want to trigger the use of other spaces. This is the piece that's gone forward. We're awfully pleased to have housing for veterans, who are at the break point between homelessness and a good, comfortable, safe, livable space, which is what they have. And this right sizes the dimensions of the boundaries for the project. And beyond that, I'd also welcome Kent Seacrest, who had the obligation to draft this complex document that we've seen several times. But this is a relatively simple change at the end.
Good afternoon, Kent Seacrest. I did not draft what's in front of you. This is a bond ordinance, and I don't touch bond ordinances, but we were the applicant, or we were seeking this change. And basically, if you remember when we did the redevelopment agreement, it allows for multiple phases. We showed you the first phase, but we're hoping there's a series of other projects that are going to come, particularly when the clinic hopefully gets announced. When we did the bond issue, we had all these phases theoretically going into one bond fund, which means that first project, they get all the proceeds. But if we all of a sudden got 2 or 3 or 4, it was kind of a pro rata. And what we decided was best for each project to stand on its own legs. So each phase will have its own bond fund. So it has to live and die off of its own tax increment. So that's what's in front of you, is to set that up individually.
Cindy.
So, thank you for being here. Okay, so as I understand it, we have a total tax increment financing that's available in the project, and this is only taking that portion that is applicable to phase 1, is that right?
That's correct. The phase 1's the only thing that will be ready to start the clock, and that's what we're trying to start here.
Okay.
The rest is not involved.
So is it possible that now with the Vash housing built that we're going to actually see an increase in the property value around the Vash housing, the part that isn't developed?
It's possible. First of all, the land is going to be tax exempt. We live off of a 75-year lease, so the land will not possibly have any, we can't capture any TIF, so that's a wash to us.
Okay, thank you.
Lyrian.
Isn't part of why this is important that depending on the spacing of time between each project area, you could, if you did it all at once, 15 years starts with the first project, and another one might not start for 5 more years, and it would only have 10 years of TIF.
Well,
so if you do it separately, they each get their 15-year timeline.
I have my friend Tim C. here, but I thought we drafted it clearly that each phase had its own 15-year clock already. It's just that while they had their own clock, we were putting the money. So if Jane owned the first bond and you owned the second bond, it was not, they were going to be pulled together. And what we now want to do is if Jane owns the first bond, Jane gets the TIF to pay back her bond just from the first project, and when you come along, 5 years or whatever, you will have your own fresh pot, so that anything that tax receipts that go into that pot, it'll all go to you. And so when John comes along with the third phase and wants to own that bond, he doesn't make a claim on your TIF tax fund.
So it keeps both the timeline and the cash separate.
Correct.
Basically. Okay.
All right, other questions? Carl?
Just to clarify that we're not in the business
No.
of TIF up here. Okay.
I should not have used that, but
Yep.
yes, these are going to be redeveloper purchased TIF bonds, but each, we have the ability to create different limited liability partnerships on each project. So the ownership per bond could be different. Thank you, Carl, for correcting that one.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Would anyone else like to testify on this item? Next item, please.
All right, next are items 6C and 6D. They are Comp Plan Amendment 18001, amending the 2040 Comp Plan by revising the boundaries of the future land use plan from commercial to residential urban density on property generally located between Alvo Road and Humphrey Avenue on Centurion Drive, and change of zone 18005, application of Leo Schumacher of Stonebridge Creek LLC for a change from B2 planned neighborhood to R3 residential on property located at Centurion Drive and Humphrey Avenue. I will note for the record, We do have a request of the applicant to place these items on pending, no date certain, but if there's anyone here to testify, they are most welcome to come forward and do so.
Okay, anyone wanting to testify?
Okay, seeing none, then I'd move we place this on pending, no date certain, to honor the applicant's request.
Second?
Okay, moved by Larry and seconded by Jane to put both of these items on indefinite pending. Discussion?
So just to be clear, that will also then involve the hearing?
Yes, it will.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, please call the roll.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Lamb?
Yes.
Raybold?
Yes.
Schob?
Yes.
Camp?
Yes.
Christensen?
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0. That concludes our public hearing. We'll move into the voting session. We'll start with ordinance's third reading, item 7A. Approving the redevelopment agreement between the city and Lincoln Sports Facility LLC to authorize the use of up to $1,295,000 of tax increment financing for the Lincoln Sports Facility redevelopment project at West O Street and Southwest 14th Plaza, introduced by Schob.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Benny, seconded by Carl. Discussion. There are some amendments, I believe.
Yes, we have 3 motions to amend.
Okay, who has the first one?
Motion to amend number 1 is presented by the Law Department to
Okay.
reduce the total amount of tax increment financing approved from $1.4 million to $1.3 million to achieve consistency with projected TIF revenue, approved sources and uses of TIF, CIP amendment, and bond ordinance, and to achieve consistency between approved sources and uses of TIF.
I need a motion.
I move motion to amend number 1.
Second.
Moved by Larry and seconded by Carl. Any discussion on this motion to amend? Please call the roll on the motion to amend number 1.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Lamb?
Yes.
Raybold?
Yes.
Schob?
Yes.
Camp?
Yes.
Christensen?
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0. Then we have motion to amend number 2, which is requested by Urban Development. This is to allow the developer to implement initial suggestions of the Urban Design Committee and present updated schematic drawings to the Urban Design Committee for further review, and to withhold final mayoral approval of the schematic drawings until further advice is provided by the Urban Design Committee.
I need a motion.
So moved.
Second?
Moved by Carl, seconded by Jane.
Is there anyone here to tell us give us some details on this?
Specifically about the Urban Design
You got to
Committee.
introduce yourself.
Sorry, David Carey with the Planning Department.
Yeah, motion to amend number 2.
Yes, and this has to do with the Urban Design Committee process.
Yes.
And is, generally speaking, it is basically an agreement to bring back further discussion, more development of the design of the main structure, to provide that information to the Urban Design Committee, and then provide those comments for consideration back to the mayor before final design is determined. That's really what that's about.
Was there any objection by the developer for this?
Not to my knowledge, no.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Further discussion on motion to amend number 2. Please call the roll on the motion to amend number 2.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Lamb?
Yes.
Raybold?
Yes.
Schob?
Yes.
Camp?
Yes.
Christensen?
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0. Then we have motion to amend number 3, which is presented by Jane Raybold.
The motion to amend number 3 is to require the redeveloper to design and construct recommended traffic improvements, if any, at the redeveloper's expense.
Second.
Moved by Jane, seconded by John. Discussion.
Well, I propose this primarily because we all recognize that this is a great project. It's a wonderful project for our city, and we want it to move forward. But I also want to bring forward some of the concerns out in the community that, tax increment financing is not a rubber stamp by the city, nor is it by our city council. So we take the expenditure towards these great projects very seriously, and we believe that they deserve thoughtful, reasonable, deliberate concerns and evaluations. So the example that I give For full disclosure, I am a developer. I love development. We know it makes our city great by continuing the pathway that we've done. We know that tax increment financing is an economic tool, and we treat it with respect. But just an example why we need to give it full scrutiny. So for example, if Public Works failed to say you need to do a traffic study, well, that was an oversight, but that always needs to get done for any tax increment financing project, and it's really customary and normal for that to happen. I give an example. So when I bring construction drawings before the city for their review and approval and stamp of approval, I get their approved construction drawings and I go out and build the project. And then when the electrical inspector walks through the door and they see that, wait a minute, this electrical is not correct, it's not up to code. And I'll say, well, wait a minute, you approved, you reviewed, you stamped for approval my drawings. The electrical inspector says, it has to be to go code, it has to be changed, you have to correct it. And I, as a developer and other folks who do this type of work, they know that they have to make the correction, no matter where it happens in the process of review, approval, and ultimately getting your certificate of occupancy. So my concern by sending a message out to our development community that if you fail to do the traffic study, that's okay. We can work it out. Well, we do want to work it out. And by working it out, it means that, you have your job to do, we have our job to do, and a traffic study is needed for all these projects. It's one step that must be completed for a consideration of approval for tax increment financing. And my concern is that are we setting up a precedent? So if Public Works Department fails to do or require a traffic study, does that give any other developer a buy so that they don't have to do the traffic study? Well, the traffic study has to be done. It has to typically be done at the developer's expense. So I don't want to set up a precedent so that it can be coming back and renegotiated as part of the discussion of moving forward with this wonderful project. We all want it to move forward, but we don't want it to be moving forward if there is some road improvements that are required by the traffic study. It really should be borne by the developer for this wonderful project. It's standard, it's customary, it's in the normal process of tax increment financing approval. And so I just don't want us to give one developer any preferential treatment. I don't want to set that up. I want to make sure that we're clear that these things come before the City Council. It's not that it's a rubber stamp by the City Council. It's part of the journey that you have to go through to get approval by the City Council. So that's some of my concerns of making sure that we really take into consideration our taxpayers' dollars. We want to make sure we bring value to our taxpayer and not put additional road expenses on their dime. This is something that is typically borne by the developer. We have like thousands of other road construction projects out there waiting for our taxpayer dollars to go to for those improvements. And this project particular, if there's any requirements, it should be borne by the developer. And I do support this project.
John.
First of all, I would echo most of, if not all, what my colleague just said. I look at this too, and I was rather surprised when this came up in our discussion last week about the deceleration lane, maybe an acceleration lane, and that it was supposedly omitted. This has been something that we've had in place for as long as I can remember. And I think it's a policy that when you come to this type of improvement on an adjacent arterial or what have you, that is borne by the developer. As Ms. Raybould said, this is a great application for TIF, and so she's made those arguments. I'm looking at the side of if we give this developer a pass, we're opening the door to future developers when in the past it's been consistent, developer pays. And no one really knows how much this is. We had different figures banded around from 60,000 to maybe as high as 300,000. We as a body owe it to our citizens and taxpayers to be fiscally responsible, and we just can't start taking on these extra burdens. We have so much on our plate as it is for streets and roads. So other than the remainder of the project, I'm also 100% in favor of. I think it's going to be a great addition for Lincoln, for the sports community, youth sports, and West O improvement. It's just as far as if there is, and we don't know for sure, there would be the need for deceleration lanes and so forth, and we don't know the cost. And I think that is a risk that needs to lie with the developer. and they could reallocate some of the TIF to pay for it if it does come to be.
Okay. Lyrian?
I'm in agreement with John and Jane. This is a fantastic project. It will help bring tourism dollars to our local economy. It'll provide better facilities and expanded facilities for youth sports, more opportunities, make our city more competitive. And for that reason, I will be supporting all three items. And the reason I'm supporting the amendment in particular is mainly because what they're talking about. We just spent on other items on our agenda a fair amount of time talking about our oversight role. And in this case, sometimes issues pop up where mistakes have been made along the way, and that's unfortunate. And I know city staff tries very hard not to make those mistakes, but in this case, there was a mistake made. And our oversight role is the opportunity to correct, to do some course correction. And we are certainly very happy to support the investment of $1.3 million in TIF, but to go the extra mile when a mistake was made that will cost taxpayers and remove road funding from another valuable project in our community is maybe a bit much to ask. So while I will vote for the overall project, I don't want to support I want to support this motion to amend as well.
Okay, other discussion? Carl?
Well, I get it. But the reality is that this was an error made by the city. If the developer had known of this requirement, if the study had been done and it was in place, they would have taken care of it. But as it is, they've made other plans, including some things that we've already voted on at this meeting, to address some of the design issues with the facilities, to make it more attractive, more useful. So I'm going to vote against it. And it also reminds me, in terms of consistency, reminds me of something that this council voted on maybe about 2 years ago, Cindy, on North 84th Street involving the Lancaster Event Center, where we, spent money, city money, to help that facility, which is, it's a public facility, but it's not our public facility. And so some similarities to that project. So for that reason, I'm opposing this.
Cindy?
Thank you. I too understand and get where our colleagues are coming from. I was actually reminded of something else. So when Carl looked at me and smiled, and I thought, oh, we're on the same track. But I was actually reminded on our oversight, probably less than 2 years ago, holding accountable our departments that collect money from developers and have that oversight function and are expected to do a certain job and to make them aware of everything prior to moving forward. And that this particular body, as I recall, maybe refunded some money to someone. It was having to do with a claim, if I recall correctly. And so in holding the department accountable, we did that. And so at this point in time, I am not going to support amendment number 3, but while I do understand the reasons behind it, I think it's just as important in our oversight that we make sure that we're keeping the staff accountable in the departments. So.
I just want to say for the record, I voted against that because it really wasn't the fault of the department at that point in time.
Mr. Chair, I have a question. I'm a little confused all the comments of my fellow council people have caused me to do a lot of thinking. I'm a little confused on the motion. Who pays for the traffic study, and is there?
Under the motion to amend number 3.
Yes.
Those, any costs incurred for the traffic study and for any turnout would be incurred by the developer.
And any improvements, if the traffic study merits that?
Be paid for by the developer.
So this motion would do both of those things?
I believe so.
Yeah, I think we have a staff question, clarification.
Abby Luttrell from the Law Department. Just as a clarification, under the existing agreement, the redeveloper pays for the traffic study, no matter what. This amendment has to do with the recommendations that come from that study and who will pay to implement those.
Abby?
Yes.
But it's customary and normal for the developer to pay for the traffic study in most, if not all, the TIF projects that we approve?
I can't speak to all projects. It really depends on the location. So for example, Innovation Campus was another that I worked on. There was no need for a traffic study there. Sometimes you do need a traffic study. So I guess it just varies on location, and that's usually, I think, customarily caught in the planning process, which is probably where it should have happened here, was when it went through the special permit process.
But in most cases, I think it's fair to say that the developer does pay for the traffic study, not.
Well, in this case, the developer would still pay for the traffic study.
Right.
Correct,
Mhm.
okay.
Yes.
All right.
And
Can I just clarify? The developer will pay for the traffic study without this amendment even, correct?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
And as the agreement is written now, if there's a recommendation for only an eastbound turn lane, then the city would assume those costs. But it is silent as to if there are any further recommendations. The only thing the city commits to is that eastbound turn lane.
Thank you.
Were you done, Benny?
Go ahead, Chuck.
Well, Abby's, well, Ms. Leftrell, I think my concern is, we heard potential, they could get up to 300,000 if you had a traffic light and so forth. And my reasoning behind supporting this amendment is that the developer pay for whatever is needed in the traffic safety study, or the traffic study. And that's just been the general policy throughout on private developments. And if we open the floodgates here, that puts an undefined burden on the city. And as has been mentioned several times by my colleagues, we have a backload that's just incredible, backlog that's incredible. And so, in addition to the traffic study, I want to see that if there is, and it's an if, or whatever resolution comes, if the city is not responsible for that is paid by the developer. So if you're just saying a deceleration lane is the only thing addressed in the agreement, then I'm even more concerned, because you could have that, but then say, well, need a traffic light or whatever. So that puts more burdens, and I think it just should be any requirements under the traffic study shall be borne by the developer.
Okay, thank you.
With
Back to Benny.
Pardon, Councilman, with no limits, I'm not sure how how adding additional costs would affect the overall project. And I was wondering, is there a range for like a cap, they'll pay so much, or a percentage of it? Is there a way to negotiate how much of that cost they would?
We'd like to put that in the form of a motion.
While you're thinking, I
Yeah,
would say.
please help me here.
While you're thinking, I think there's a possibility of maybe negotiating, but I don't know that we should say the citizens of Lincoln have an unlimited guarantee here. I just cannot see that. The project has been defined, and hopefully all the studies have been done, and the review, the way it's been designed, that it will stand on its own. If we're going to be out there guaranteeing the success of private developers, I think we're in the wrong role.
Okay.
And I don't want to magnify too much here. I suspect that whatever is required is not going to be a major item, but regardless of what it is, that should fall on the developer.
Last week, we heard from Jeff Mall, and we talked about the positive economic impact this would have on the community. And there was a discussion then that it might behoove us as the city to help with the project by covering that cost. And I would like to make a motion that we consider a cap on how much the developer has to pay on that. Maybe a shared cost, since it was kind of a city era. Say maybe I'd like to make a motion that we cap any expenses for the deceleration lane to be paid by the developer at $55,000.
Second.
Okay, the motion is to amend the amendment is to cap the developer expenses at $55,000. Seconded by Cindy. Discussion on the motion to amend the amendment. Is that?
Just for a point of clarification, can we say traffic improvements rather than
Traffic
deceleration lane?
improvement?
Thank you. Yes.
Okay, traffic improvement then. Discussion on the amendment, of the amendment.
Get some staff to come up too, yes.
Mr. Kirkpatrick, with that in mind, and Ms. Luttrell, where you said it's not in the, maybe it's Luttrell, Ms. Luttrell's the appropriate person to respond, So you said only the deceleration lane was in the agreement as it is. Mr. Kirkpatrick suggested any traffic improvement, I believe, or what have you. So.
More legal language then.
So.
Help us out here, please.
The way the agreement, as it reads right now, is only that eastbound turn lane. The request for the motion from Councilwoman Raybold was not limited to that. It was for any recommended improvement. So.
And this motion is also to any recommended improvement then?
That's why I made
Yeah,
a suggestion,
yeah,
just so
okay.
we weren't making it more confusing.
Okay.
So that would include a traffic light if that was.
Well, and I can just, I don't want to get too in the weeds, but my understanding from Public Works is that this is not an appropriate spot for a traffic light, that is very unlikely to be the recommendation, and that it's JEO's, the firm that's doing the study, and Public Works, it's their opinion that this right-hand turn lane is likely what the recommendation will be.
Okay. Other discussion on the.
Well, I would ask my colleague, would you, since it was suggested 60,000 by the attorney for the developer, what if we'd share 50% each if it's over 60,000 instead of your 55,000?
For the sake of conversation,
Friendly
yes.
amendment to that, and a seconder?
I'll second that.
I
By
hate
John?
Okay, so we're a little.
I don't mean to
You
go-
guys
No, no,
are
you're
giving me
fine.
a-
I
frankly, you're giving me a
appreciate the
headache, 'cause
help.
Now we have an amendment to the amendment to the amendment.
No, it's a friendly amendment.
No, we don't do friendly amendments anymore.
Well,
I understand what he's saying. I
You
would
can
like
withdraw
to,
your amendment and reword it if you like, but we're not going to accept a friendly amendment.
may I just reword my amendment?
You go first, you withdraw it.
Ugh. I really just wanted to have an additional conversation about this, so I withdraw my amendment.
Okay, you want to make a new one?
I'd like to make a new amendment that we cap the cost of
Traffic
Traffic
improvements.
traffic improvements at $60,000.
and anything over that, if there is, we'd split it 50/50.
Anything over that, if there is, we split it 50/50.
Okay,
That's just an amendment to the original motion,
his motion.
amendment to the amendment.
Okay, is there a second to that?
I thought, I'll second it. I thought I heard someone second it.
Okay,
I'm still hung up a little bit on our discussion last week about the improvements and how this was good for the city, and how we've kind of already committed to doing this, and we've kind of moving forward. As John talked about his Matterhorn and snowball effect, this is already a snowball coming down the hill, and we're trying to divert it a little. So I want to have a conversation where we can be good stewards of the money, but we can also kind of keep to our word on the original contract. And that's why I wanted to make the motion, so we could have the conversation about it. I'm done talking.
okay. Let me restate.
Thank you.
The amendment to the amendment. We're talking about amending
Number 3.
Jane and John's amendment number 3. The amendment is that there will be a $60,000 cap on any traffic improvements, and anything over $60,000 will be 50/50 shared by the developer and the city. Is that everyone's understanding?
60,000.
60,000, what's that?
Paid by the developer.
Paid by the.
If
paid by the
deemed by the
developer.
traffic study.
Right.
So, I'm sorry, 60,000 cap to the developer?
To the
Is that what-
developer.
Okay.
And then after that 60,000, if there's more money involved, then it will be a 50/50 split between the developer and the city. That's the amendment to the amendment. So.
That's how I muddied the water.
It's okay. Jane,
Did
Cindy?
Camp withdraw his motion?
Yes, it never went anywhere.
Okay.
right,
I'm sorry, Mr. Chair.
it's true.
All right, very good.
I really commend Councilmember Schob for coming up with that. I really hate negotiating from our position right up here. I recognize that Public Works normally does a fabulous job, planning, fabulous job. This is frustrating for me, but I am going to support it because I want to move forward. We need to get the traffic study done. We need to get the improvements, if any, in the works so this project can be completed and opened up by, I think they had a very, very aggressive construction schedule on doing that. And I think if we can all support this amendment where the developer does pay up to $60,000 of any traffic improvements called out for by the traffic study, and above that we split 50/50, I think that's a great deal for everybody.
Okay. Let's,
I would just like to say thank you, Mr. Schob. I think that's a good suggestion on your part.
All right, I'm going to call the roll on the amendment.
Can we all talk a little bit?
Sure. As long as you don't talk on the next part. Just kidding.
Well, I think
just
it's
kidding.
important just to hit home this point. There's the discussion about the testimony about this being something the city should support, and I just want to recognize that $1.3 million in TIF is a big chunk of money to help support the project. And I do appreciate this amendment to the motion to amend, and I'm going to support it as well. In part, I guess, for this issue of staff accountability. And in addition to this, I would hope that our city staff could, if they do not already have a checklist that they route through the different departments, that they come up with one. Because, I mean, we don't want to be in this position again, and we do not want to be negotiating up here again. This feels messy, and we want to move forward. So yes, I will support this, but keeping in mind that it's part of a much larger package of support for this, what I think will be a terrific project.
Well, Lyrian, it only feels messy because it is. So I'm going to call the roll on the motion to amend amendment number 3.
No, this would be motion to amend number 4.
Motion to amend number. This is.
It's
Yes,
a
it
motion
is.
to amend amendment number
Yes.
3.
Amendment to number
Right.
3.
Right.
Yep.
I had it right. Please call the roll.
Eskridge,
Yes.
Gaylor Baird,
Yes.
Lamb,
Yes.
Raybold,
Yes.
Schob,
Yes.
Camp,
Yes.
Christensen.
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0.
Okay, now is there further discussion of a motion to amend number 3? Cindy?
I appreciate the motion that Councilman Show brought forward and the work to try to alleviate some of the cost. I am concerned because we're up here voting on an agreement that is now changing if this amendment passes, and the developer is not part of that change. They really expressed last week, of course, their objection to it, given the time when this was inserted. I understand the traffic study is being done at this
Yes.
point in time from the testimony that we heard, and so I'm still not going to support this amendment if it passes. Obviously, it passes with the changes, and appreciative of that. But I don't feel at this point in time that I can support this amendment and come this far into the process and ask the developer to take on potentially more responsibility when we have an agreement that they agreed to in front of us. So.
Okay. Carl?
Yes, thank you. And thanks for those comments, Cindy. I'm in a very similar position. Remembering back in Dave Landis's negotiation class many years ago, and, and it feels a lot like that as we're trying to figure this out. You know, I went out west to look at the site over the week, and the developer has done a project already on the west side of where this will be located, in a very attractive looking development. And then you turn the road off Westo into where the development will be, and it's pretty scary. So the improvements that are going to be made to the Westo neighborhood are significant, and even more important is what's being offered to the kids and the families in our community. And I just think this is a tremendously important project, as I know we all do. But I do also feel that, you know, if this was a requirement that the city had, it should have been up front.
Jane?
You know, I do support this project. I think it's a great project. I think it's one that the city of Lincoln needs. I have to tell you, from my institutional history, you know, being a county commissioner, when we built the Lancaster County Jail on Westo, we knew that traffic was going to be an issue because of how fast traffic goes on West O, and we want to make sure we put in the necessary safety measures to move that project forward. And that was first and foremost. And so I was really surprised that this wasn't first and foremost on part of the planning department and Public Works. I was really, really surprised. But now that we've caught it, it's our job to do our job and correct it. And so that's why I'm going to support this. And I'm thinking this is a great deal for the developer. If it were caught early in the process, the developer would be on the hook for the entire cost of any traffic improvements for safety or for consideration of traffic flow that moves traffic in our city. So for that reason, I think it's a great deal, and I'm certainly going to support it.
Okay, any comments over here? Okay, I will make a comment. First of all, I believe the developer has met the but-for test. And in that, by that standard, laying additional costs on them just means, in my mind, that money comes out of the TIF we're giving them. So that makes no sense at all to me. Second of all, we've already have a history that was pointed out by Carl, 84th and Holdridge, the changes out there for the Lancaster County Event Center. Also, finally, and for me, the most important point is the benefit of this project to the city, both culturally and financially, will far outweigh any additional cost that might be incurred for traffic changes. So I am going to oppose amendment number 3. Please call the roll.
Eskridge?
No.
Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Lamb?
No.
Raybold?
Yes.
Schob?
No.
Camp?
Yes.
Christensen?
No.
Motion lost, 3-4.
Now we'll call, any discussion on the main motion? I think we've all expressed support. Any further discussion? John?
I would just like to say that this, in my mind, should not be considered a precedent for other developers, period.
Okay.
And I just want to repeat Councilwoman Baird's comment that there has to be a checklist.
Yes.
We have to adhere to a checklist. And any future projects, do the traffic study. And we expect to hold you responsible for all the traffic improvements as well.
Okay. Other comments?
Just that no deal is done until it comes to the council and is approved. And I feel like we all need to be aware of that. I think everyone knows that. And to the extent that there was a bargain struck between the administration and the applicant when they discovered the mistake, I mean, I think they had to both be aware that it wasn't guaranteed until it came to this body. And if we are going to do an oversight and accountability role, we have to do that even when it's painful. And I'm sorry that this kind of compromise we worked out at the dais just fell apart. It felt really weird for that to just go away after what seemed like a nice compromise. That said, this is an exciting project. I really appreciate it when people in our community go out to other communities, see what's happening, see what's exciting, and decide to bring it here to Lincoln. It helps grow our city and make it a better place for families, for children, for our local businesses, and for us to compete to be one of the top cities in America. This is going to make us a better city, and I am pleased to have the opportunity to support it.
Other comments? This is a good thing. Please call the roll.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Lamb?
Yes.
Raybold?
Yes.
Schob?
Yes.
Camp?
Yes.
Christensen?
Yes.
Motion carried, 7-0. Next then is item 7B, amending the fiscal year 17-18 CIP to authorize and appropriate $1,295,000 in TIP funds for the Lincoln Sports Facility redevelopment project, introduced by Schob.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Benny, seconded by Carl. Discussion?
Didn't we change this to 1.3?
I think there's a motion to amend.
Oh,
coming
okay.
up. Yeah,
Yep.
I agree with you.
I'd like to move motion to amend number 1.
Number 1.
Second.
Moved by, motion amendment number 1, moved by Lyrian, seconded by Benny. This is a correction of the amount of TIF, correct?
Right, from 1.295 to 1.3 million.
Okay. Any further discussion? Please call the roll on the amendment number 1.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Lamb?
Yes.
Raybold?
Yes.
Schob?
Yes.
Camp?
Yes.
Christensen?
Yes.
Motion carried, 7-0.
Now on the main motion.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Lamb?
Yes.
Raybold?
Yes.
Schob?
Yes.
Camp?
Yes.
Christensen?
Yes.
Motion carried, 7-0. Next then is item 7C, authorizing the issuance of tax allocation bonds for the Lincoln Sports Facility project, introduced by Schob.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Benny, seconded by Carl. Is there an amendment to this, I understand?
Yes, Mr. Chair, there is a motion to amend. I'd like to move that we amend this item to change the dollar figures from okay, this one's different. This one says not to exceed,
Right.
yes, to reduce the total bond not to exceed the value of $1.4 million to $1.3 million throughout the bond ordinance, replacing $1.4 million with $1.3 million on the cover letter recital, section 1.1D, section 2.1 definition of bonds, and section 3.1, section 3.2B3, and section 9.1. Lots of words there.
Moved by Benny. Do I need a second?
Second.
Seconded by Carl. Discussion? Please call the roll on amendment number 1.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Lamb?
Yes.
Raybold?
Yes.
Schob?
Yes.
Camp?
Yes.
Christensen?
Yes.
Motion carried, 7-0.
Now on the main motion?
Eskridge?
Yes.
Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Lamb?
Yes.
Raybold?
Yes.
Schob?
Yes.
Camp?
Yes.
Christensen?
Yes.
Motion carried, 7-0. Next then is item 7D, approving a contract between the city and the Lincoln Haymarket Development Corporation to operate and regulate a Saturday public market in the Haymarket area from May 5th through October 13th, 2018, introduced by Schob.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Benny, seconded by Carl. Discussion on John.
Yes, I'd like to make an amendment to change the dates to commence May 5th, 2018, and to conclude October 31st, 2019.
You want to make
Be a
this 2
two-year
years?
contract.
Discussion with,
I need a second.
he needs a second for that.
Second, for
Okay,
purposes of discussion.
okay, seconded by Cindy.
Jeff Patrick, City Attorney, what you might do is ask for the contract to be amended to make it a 2-year contract running from the first Saturday in May of 2018 through the second Saturday in October 2019.
That'd be fine. My iPhone didn't go that far, so I didn't have
No,
a date.
I appreciate that, but that would probably put you exactly where you want to be.
And
So moved then.
First Saturday of May.
so moved.
2018 through the second Saturday of October 2019.
Okay, so that's moved and seconded. Do we have further comments on it?
And for the record, my understanding is the other parties to the contract not only would agree to this, but would support it wholeheartedly.
Okay,
Yeah,
Cindy.
if I could just ask a question. So we're not saying from the first of Saturday in May to the second October, Saturday in October of each year, we're saying from the 18 all the way through the end of 19?
No, that's a good clarification. I think the purpose is to do during the summer months. So it would be through the second Saturday of October 2018, and then the first Saturday of May of 2019 through the second Saturday of October 2019. So you've got the two separate terms.
Okay, thank you.
Don't run through.
We
Okay,
And as Mr. Kirkpatrick said, yes, my understanding, Mr. Landis could confirm it, that both the parties, urban development, are happy with that. And this would be something we'd observe, and if it didn't work, we could change it in 2 years.
Mr. Chair, I just have a question. Following Councilwoman Land's statement, we all understand that language, but it's not in here. Do we need
to
to?
make sure it's written so in the, after we.
Thank you, I missed that part. I appreciate it.
I'm on
Thank
it.
you. Thank you, Teresa.
Okay. On amendment number 1, we love amendments today.
Yeah.
Amendment number 1 to 7D. Please call the roll.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Lamb?
Yes.
Raybold?
Yes.
Schob?
Yes.
Camp?
Yes.
Christensen?
Yes.
Motion carried, 7-0.
Now on the main motion.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Lamb?
Yes.
Raybold?
Yes.
Schob?
Yes.
Camp?
Yes.
Christensen?
Yes.
Motion carried, 7-0. Our resolutions on first reading are items 8A and B. Ordinances first reading are items 9A through D. Our pending list date certain are items 10A and B, and our pending list are items 11A through C.
Mr. Chair, I move for adjournment.
Second.
Moved by John, seconded by Jane. Please call the roll.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Lamb? Raybold?
Yes.
Schob?
Yes.
Camp?
Yes.
Christensen?
Yes.
Motion carried, 7-0.
We're adjourned.